Hey, this is a video for 5.15, Sustainable Agriculture. So go ahead and check out the overview and set up your guided notes. So in order to have sustainable agriculture, we need to prevent soil degradation. When you are constantly reusing the soil season after season after season, some places we may even have 2 harvests within a single season or more. Eventually this soil can be worn out, and we want to make sure that we are preventing that in order to continue our agriculture, relatively indefinitely. So there are some methods to prevent soil degradation. And what we need to do is we need to maintain the nutrient levels within the soil. We need to allow the soil to retain its moisture, and there needs to be components in the soil to help it retain its moisture content. We also need to foster a habitat for decomposers, because decomposers are going to be the best way to return these nutrients back to the soil for use by future agricultural crops. And also we need to maintain the organic content within the soil. So a lot of these are all interrelated, and there are a few simple but effective practices that we can use in order to prevent soil degradation. So for starters, we want to minimize the amount of nutrients that are depleted from the soil. So this means either minimizing the nutrients we're taking away or finding ways of replenishing the nutrients. So one way is agroforestry, and agroforestry is when you have, tree crops, like for example, you may have apples or citrus, or, even something like grapes. So you'll basically have like rows of perennials and rows of annuals. Perennials are crops that just keep growing over year after year. A lot of them tend to be woody and be trees. This is not, I've shown you other images, but this is not the best image. I just wanted to show you my dog right there. And this is in my hometown, but this is not really truly agroforestry, but this does serve as a windbreak because it's very flat there. So this will prevent the wind from eroding the soil. Now, what agroforestry does is you're not going to be removing the same nutrients year after year because the nutrient requirements by the trees are going to be different than the nutrient requirements by the plants. And there's other practices that should be implemented at the same time. One of them is crop rotation. So crop rotation is very important, and what you see here is you see like last year's corn. This is some corn that's left over from the previous harvest. And then you have some soybeans. So soybeans are nitrogen fixers. They're legumes, and they're very important in rejuvenating the nutrient level in the soil. So one crop like corn removes so many nutrients from the soil, and it's a nutrient and it's a water hog. So you can't really raise corn over and over and over again. So it's nice to rotate it because these legumes will add nitrogen back to the soil that was removed by the corn. So when you're trying to minimize nutrient depletion, what you really want to do is just not plant the same thing over and over and over again. So this is one way why agroforestry is sort of like a form of crop rotation, so to speak. But definitely these two need to be done in tandem. Now, intercropping. This is intercropping is kind of the same, another version of agroforestry, another version of crop rotation. Intercropping is when you have different rows of agricultural crops grown next to each other. And that means that you're not going to have one nutrient depleted from the entire field. You're going to have different areas where different plants are going to be removing certain nutrients. And if you intercrop with a nitrogen fixer, you can actually replenish some of the nutrients as well. You can also have a cover crop, and a cover crop, a great cover crop to grow is something like clover. Clover, even though it's not a legume, it is a nitrogen fixer. So clover can be grown as a cover crop in between the rows of crops, and that will help to replenish nitrogen as well. Other cover crops you could use, you can use like fava beans, you can use different types of beans. Alfalfa is a good cover crop. Basically something that's going to replenish nitrogen if possible. Another thing you can do is you can use limestone. And limestone or lime doesn't mean lime juice, but limestone is calcium carbonate. And when you add this to the soil, it's a way of bringing the pH of the soil back up. And when the soil is less acidic, the clay particles can hold on to some of these positively charged cations. And those cations are important nutrients for the soil. So when the soil is slightly a little bit more basic or more neutral, it allows the soil to hold on to nutrients better. Now, in practice, one example of intercropping is something that was done, thousands of years ago by indigenous people here in the United States. It's called Three Sisters. You're growing 3 crops next to each other. You got corn, you got some legumes, and then you have some viney like a squash or a pumpkin. And all 3 of these were done by the indigenous populations here, like over the last 10,000 years in North America. In fact, it's so, grained in our history that it's on one of the $1 bills. But this is something because corn is a depleter of nutrients. The beans will replenish the nutrients, and the squash or the pumpkins will give some sort of ground cover to prevent soil erosion. So the humans, we've known about this, for a long time, and the indigenous population in the United States or in North America has really perfected this. So this is one example of a sustainable practice. Now, another thing you want to do is minimize soil erosion because the topsoil is very nutrient rich and you have the organic layer on top as well. So you want to try to minimize the amount that is going to wash away. 2 things you can do is you can do contour plowing, and contour plowing is beneficial in areas where it is hilly. So you'll basically plow in a certain way, so you're plowing kind of perpendicular to the slope. So if the slope goes this way, you're going to be plowing perpendicular to that to prevent the water from rushing down the side of the hill. This was a picture I took in Ecuador showing some of these. If you've also seen like terracing, if you look at pictures where the rice paddies are grown in China or in Southeast Asia, they will do terracing, which is basically like digging steps in the side of the hill. Another thing is having no-till agriculture. No-till agriculture means that you're not breaking up the soil after every harvest. So you're not re-tilling the soil. You're doing very minimally intrusive when you're basically injecting the seeds into the soil, so you're not breaking up the soil and then just dropping the seeds down. The other thing you would do is like this would also add the waste products like the stalks from the plants, and that would be just added back into the soil, so it will allow it to decompose and return some of the nutrients. Another thing you can do is hydroponics, and you hopefully have seen some of this in the lab. This is a setup I have in my yard where I'm growing tomatoes, I'm growing some golden berries, I'm growing a lot of kale. But what it is you're using a flowing nutrient solution. Basically, you're just using water with nutrients added, and it is allowing these plants to grow without soil. Hydroponics is very good because it's compact. You can do it in an urban environment. It's great for people that have very limited space. You can also do it like in your windowsill. You can also provide targeted nutrients. So some plants require different nutrient requirements. So you can actually adjust the nutrients that you're providing. And if you use aquaponics, which is basically hydroponics over a fish tank, you can also produce fish as well. So it's not always easy. You need to maintain your pump. My pump will go out. I've had problems where my pump will go out or there'll be a leak. So it's a lot of like daily maintenance. There is a potential for leaks. Sometimes some of these plants produce a lot of root mass and it will block the flow, which is a problem. So I kind of have to clear that out sometimes. And I have to monitor the nutrient levels and the pH, but that would be kind of the same thing you're going to be doing in a regular garden. Oh, and basically with this is, you can harvest this. You can do some of this indoors. You can do some of it outdoors as well. You can harvest for, probably a little bit longer than you could in the regular growing season. Another thing is organic agriculture. And these are images that I took on different Global Glimpse trips to Ecuador. But organic agriculture is just food that is produced now without synthetic fertilizers, without synthetic pesticides, without any sort of genetically modified organisms, and also without ionizing radiation. So sometimes they'll use radiation to kind of sterilize and kill pests in fruits and vegetables. That is not permitted in organic agriculture. Organic agriculture cannot have any sort of bioengineering. It can have organic fertilizers like in the form of manure. Green manure is recycled plant material. You can have animal manure as long as those animals were raised, without any, additives that can be used. And pesticides, you can use some of the integrated pest management techniques, just no synthetic pesticides. What I would like you to do is respond to this check for understanding. And for FRQ practice, I want you to explain how a specific soil conservation practice preserves soil integrity. So I hope that this video is informative. I thank you for your attention, and I will see you soon.